Now, before we begin, this is just my perspective. If you want a more objective review, I would recommend going into the description where I'll link some much better, more exhaustive reviews. But here's my take. So the G95 pre-ordered right now is right around $1,200 with the kit lens. I imagine once it circulates in the market a little bit, it'll drop to maybe $1,000 used with the kit lens, and then maybe $800 to $900 used body only. Now, if you compare that to the G85, and I don't want to make this a comparison video again, but the cost difference is going to end up being right around $400 to $500 when it's all said and done. So ultimately, you'll be shelling out $400 or $500 extra over the G85. So then the question becomes, is $400 or $500 extra worth it when you can just buy the G85? G85 aside, you can shell out an extra $200 to $300 and get something like a GH5 for maybe $1,200 to $1,300 used, or you can get it brand new for $1,500, albeit you won't be getting a lens with it. The GH5 just has a significantly more value for that extra $200 to $300 versus the G95. You're shelling out $400 or $500 extra dollars over its predecessor and getting just such incremental upgrades. So I think this is personally relevant and why you shouldn't buy it, because just for a few extra $100, you can end up buying the GH5. And you know what'll happen once the G95 hits the markets, the G85 will drop in value even more. And that's definitely something you want to consider if you're just looking at it from a cost benefit standpoint. Now, the second reason to not buy the G95 is low bit rates. This is something I've been talking about and mentioning in various videos for a while, but having the 60p be at 28 megabits per second, you go multiply that by 0.40 and you're only shooting what, 12, 13 megabits per second once it's slowed down. So that's not a lot of room to grade versus the GH4, which really saved me with its 100 megabit per second bitrate that I was shooting in. And if you really want, you can shoot in 200 megabit per second all intra codec to have even more room in post with the GH4 for color grade. Now, I correct and grade every single thing I shoot. So the 60p on the G95 worries me a little bit when it comes to shooting in professional settings. For instance, a few weeks ago, I shot a wedding that had a ton of mixed lighting situations, albeit I was able to shut some lights off in some situations. There was other situations that I was not able to shut off different lights. So if I had been shooting those scenes with the G85 or G95 with the same 28 megabit per second bitrate, I would have run into problems in post when I'm trying to color correct to all these different light sources. So it turned out that shooting on the GH4 that day really did save me. And that really brings up the GH4. And like I said, I don't want to make this a comparison video between all the Panasonic's different cameras, but if you look at the GH4 compared to the G95, the 60p codecs are going to be significantly different. So you can shoot at 100 megabits per second or 200 megabits per second on the GH4, whereas the G95, you can only go up to 28 megabits per second. So that would mean that you would really have to get your image really nice out of camera, which I'm sure you could do, but you just won't be able to do a ton with it in post. So in regards to the G95, if you're going to be looking into projects that are going to require 60p or 120p and just really heavy color grading, color correcting in weird situations, I would not recommend the G95 for that. I would look into a GH4, GH5, or a Sony camera that shoots better in low light, which brings us to our next point. Now, while the G85 was a really nice improvement over the GH4 when it comes to low light performance and maintaining colors at higher ISOs, in comparison to full frame or APS-C cameras, the Micro Four Thirds system really does fall short in low light situations. And while I'm confident you'll be able to push the G95 to maybe 3200 ISO and still maintain a really nice image, and that's only based on my experience with the G85, and even at 3200 it gets a little sketchy. But I imagine if you combine low light situations, high ISOs, and low bit rates, you're gonna end up with some really serious problems in post when you try to color correct, color grade, denoise, and all of that with your footage. So that's definitely something to consider if you shoot a ton of low light situations. So if you shoot a lot of low light, you might be better off choosing a Sony a6300, 6500, or an a7 II, a7 III. Those would probably be better options for you. So when it comes down to it, that extra $400 or $500 is seriously just not worth it for me. There hasn't been any slow-mo bitrate upgrades, so that's a big gripe. And then also the fact that Micro Four Thirds sensors may not work for you if you're shooting in a lot of low light situations could be a deal breaker. But for me, I'm gonna stick with my G85 for now. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back next week with some reasons to buy the G95.